Macron of France has basically called for Israel to surrender. We'll talk about that uh, more in a bit. Because of that, Netanyahu responded to him directly, calling him a disgrace and shame on him. In return, the French, I believe, Prime Minister and a few more French politicians have called Netanyahu's reaction as too much, as a overreaction. Um, so we will be going through basically what has happened just quickly. Whenever I decide on what the topic should be, many times there is something that happens and I see it and I'm like, that would be a good topic. There's just not enough. And for this one, it was when Macron said it. I'd say maybe it could be a topic. Then Netanyahu responded, and then I was like, oh, this could really be a topic. And then we had a French response to Netanyahu, and I'm like, well, that's a topic. Um, so quickly, I'd also before we start, I'd like to mention that Iran has just or basically will close its airspace for the night until Monday morning. So many people are speculating that Israel might attack, and either Iran somehow gained the knowledge or is suspecting it. So it might be the closure of airspace might be because of it. If it happens, I don't think it will happen during either of the shows. So if it does happen, we might have a special episode as we did when Iran attacked. But we'll see where it goes. So now, what has happened? So as I said, Macron basically called Israel to surrender. It's not really, but I think fundamentally that's what it is. What he did say he basically called for an not necessarily embargo, but for countries to stop exporting arms and weapons to Israel to basically force some sort of peaceful resolution, some sort of ceasefire. Quoting him now, I think that today the priority is that we return to a political solution, that we stop delivering weapons to fight in Gaza. Um, the article I've read it was Al Jazeera, funnily enough, and I think they put it very interestingly. They said while France is not a leading weapons provider for Israel, which is a really interesting way of saying France doesn't provide any weapons to Israel and hasn't for a while, and even when it did, it was small fraction to what, for example, the US does. Uh, so just one more quote for him before we go into it. He also said, I think we are not being hurt. I think it is a mistake, including for the security of Israel. So basically, we have to stop giving the means of defense to Israel for Israel's sake. Joining me today is James. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Hey, James, what do you think about President Macron's statement?
What a truly evil, despicable statement it is. And what a disgrace it is for a Western leader to say such a thing. To call for a ceasefire is to support what his country recognizes, what the EU recognizes as a terrorist organization and has for many years, Hezbollah. Hezbollah in the wake of killing just a dozen children in northern Israel recently, bombing homes in northern Israel, displacing 70,000 or more Israelis from northern Israel. That what Israel's doing is an overreaction. No, sir, the political solutions, diplomatic solutions for decades have failed and gave us October 7th. To pull your punches now would be, and we now know with clarity that Hezbollah was planning another October 7th attack on Israel in the north. They were planning on invading the Galilee region and doing much the same as Hamas had done in the south, in the north of Israel. So Macron is outright defending the forces of evil. It was like when my president Biden said, whatever you do in fighting back on Iran, Israel, don't hit the nuclear sites. What? What? I mean, that is insane. That's defending the nuclear program of the world's largest sponsor of terrorism. Why Mr. Biden would be protecting Iran in this fashion is utterly suicidal to the West's interests. Now, Macron gives arguments such as, well, it'll only continue to fester hatreds and animosities. And can you imagine hatred against Israel being more intense from Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas? No, you can't get there. We've topped out on the hatred and animosity to Israel thing, Monsieur Macron. It is absurd to think that's how. And secondly, it assumes that they wouldn't, that a real decisive action wouldn't change their attitudes. Maybe Allah's not on your side anymore. Maybe you should be psychologically crushed in this way. But when it comes to a ceasefire now, when Iran's on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon, Iran has twice this year sent out dozens and dozens of guided ballistic missiles in the direction of Iran. That is one nation state against another nation state. And if you say, well, look, you blocked most of the punch, you only had a poor Bedouin the first time get killed. You only had a Palestinian in the West Bank this time get killed, although others were injured. Although Iranian missiles left craters on the ground in Israel, although Iran is on the verge of getting nuclear weapons, Macron is calling for a ceasefire. If there is a nuclear attack by Iran, it will be in part Macron's fault for calling for a ceasefire. He will have blood dripping off his hands. Calling for a ceasefire now is demanding more October 7th. We've seen what diplomatic solutions do. We've seen what that we've lived the sad history of decades now, which caused October 7th, did not prevent it. And he is insisting on the same policy which caused October 7th. Macron apparently will not be happy until more Jews get tortured, raped, slaughtered, civilian homes get bombed. That's what he's in favor of. They're actively defending, even though his country and the EU recognize Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. Even though we're officially opposed to Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Does he really believe that? No, he doesn't. He doesn't put his money where his mouth is. He really opposed the Iranian nuclear program. He would be saying, this is the moment to take it out. In fact, he would, if he had any concern at all about Iran's terrorism or Iran getting a nuclear weapon, he would say, what can we do to help Israel? That's the decent moral position. That is the decent moral position. But no, he wants to perpetuate the hatreds. He wants endless wars. If history is any indication, his policy would be a policy of October 7th and more endless semi-war until Israel is finally destroyed. That is what, and it's the deep anti-Semitism that he and his country have long reflected. His country has been one of the most ugly, despicable centers of anti-Semitism in this world, frankly. I could name many, many, many examples through the course of history of French ugly anti-Semitism, and we're seeing again here. Don't be deceived by this. I'm protecting the Arab people, the Muslim people. I'm respecting all people's rights. No, that's a lie. It's the rank, ugly anti-Semitism that demands more October 7th that Monsieur Macron is advocating. And if he doesn't think that Netanyahu should take this opportunity to take out Hezbollah, which France has regarded and the EU has regarded as a terrorist organization for many years, then he's a hypocrite. He doesn't really believe that. He doesn't think Hezbollah is an enemy that should be destroyed. It should be destroyed. And the idea that somehow the emotions of the Muslim world are sort of innate is racism. The notion that somehow their hatred of Israel and civilization, mind you, could get any worse is total nonsense. It's a sheer argument from emotion, and it ignores the facts on the ground. You couldn't get worse hatred of Israel and Jews than we are seeing on display from Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran right now. He is opposed to the concept of self-defense as such. He is opposed to the concept of self-defense. He insists that the victims, Israel, must suck it up every time they get attacked by a country like Iran. Well, what's one innocent victim here or there? We need a proportionate response. No, we didn't need Mr. Macron. We did not do a proportionate response when the Nazis invaded and took over your country. It is not a proportionate response called for. And just because, Great Britain wasn't invaded by the Nazis, Great Britain was being attacked by, those missiles and stuff, but only a proportionate response would have been appropriate. An invasion of France would have been uncalled for. But Britain, ceasefire now. Ceasefire now, France, when the Nazis invade your country. That's what you're calling for, Monsieur Macron. That is what you're calling for. Evil like the Nazis having free reign in the area. No, Macron's statement is despicable. It is a defense. It is a defense of terrorism, a defense, an attack on Israel. And I can only imagine it is rooted in the worst kind of anti-Semitism, the kinds of anti-Semitism that his country has long been famous for, infamous for, I should say.
We have a super sticker from Gail. Thank you so much. A super chat from PC who says boycott anti-Semitic France. And also a super chat
Yes.
from Alexei who says something which I'll get to in just a bit because it's going to the second part of this topic. Many people in the chat right now are doing what I would call an ad hominem attacks on President Macron. Some are saying he is paid or he takes orders from Beijing. Some are saying he is just pandering to the Muslim vote. When it comes to things like this, I always challenge it because the assumption almost is that the people of France are pro-Israeli, are pro-Western, like really in masses, and there's just this one guy who is like stopping them. No, he was elected. He was elected for his opinions, and he is there was a election most recently, which we've seen. There is that sort of sentiment in the West. You have to remember when it comes to democracies, when it comes to representative governments, the politicians want to be elected again, want to be in power, and they'll do whatever or at least they'll do whatever they think will get them elected. They might be wrong, of course, but again, will he get something from that if he's saying these things? Will he actually be beaten in the polls when it comes to election? I'm not sure when the next election is, but that's something that's always I think important to remember that, yeah, these people represent a certain section of the population.
Absolutely. I'm questioning his motives myself, and one could say that I'm engaged in ad hominem, but I'm afraid that we have to start when a policy is so overtly evil. That is to say, when a country that's been repeatedly attacked by ballistic missiles, a country that's on the verge of getting nuclear weapons, just because Israel has managed to block most of those blows, they have no right to defend themselves, in effect, and attack. Ceasefire now. Just because Hezbollah has fired thousands of rockets, 10,000 rockets into Israel, just because they've destroyed homes, just because they've killed a dozen children, they would ceasefire now, ceasefire now. See, he is the essence of what's wrong is that he does not understand or believe in self-defense. He's calling for the good guys to unilaterally disarm and suck it up. Okay, that is morally wrong. Now, it is perfectly valid at that point when we realize how evil Macron's position is, how pro October 7th, how pro Hezbollah his position is. Once you've identified that in fact, now you have to wonder why. He wouldn't tolerate this in other contexts. He wouldn't permit other countries to get attacked repeatedly attacked in barrages of ballistic missiles without a response. No, there's something unique to Israel. And what could possibly be his motivation here? Well, as I said, I can only think that he thinks that Muslims would get angrier, as if they could get angrier, as if he thinks that their attitudes are somehow innate, which is a racist argument, or somehow belongs to that long tradition of Dreyfus Affair type anti-Semitism that his country is well known for. So these are, yes, I'm looking for his motives, but the motives are not hard to find when you look at France's policy towards Israel since its inception. Since its inception. So
Yeah, again, I would.
There's nothing wrong with looking for motives, but I think those motives are just simply missing the point. As you point out, he is a reflection of his country's attitudes, including anti-Semitism, by the way.
But yeah, again, then I'm wondering because we've seen the same thing when it comes to Ukraine for the longest time. No, we cannot give them any longer. We cannot actually allow Ukraine to strike into Russia. That again will just anger Russia more. So we've seen the similar thing. That's why I always, you always look for the most reasonable or sort of like the most logical explanation. And the fact is that the West doesn't have the moral clarity and the moral confidence to basically defend itself, or defend itself against evil, either when it comes to Israel or when it comes to Ukraine. If, let's say, France got attacked much more directly, you might actually see some better response from them, but it would be pragmatic. Ideologically, they would still be basically in the same sort of philosophy.
Right. I mean, if you think that, I mean, there are people who out there in the political world who think that World War II was a war crime by the Allies, that the way Britain and America fought the World War II was a war crime. We didn't care about civilians in Germany when we firebombed Dresden. We actually did actually care about world civilians and world peace, just as when we dropped nuclear weapons on Japan. No, to decisively end those wars was the good thing for peace and for the people in Japan and Germany. Similarly, Macron is betraying the Islamic world. People who are oppressed in the Islamic world by theocracies and dictatorships that he is seeking to protect with ceasefires. He doesn't want them destroyed, he wants them protected. And insofar as they are savage places that oppress women and hang gays and end free speech, and there is no religious freedom, he is supporting such regimes. He is supporting savage regimes that are the least rights respecting in the world. And he's outright defending them, calling for their sustained existence, calling for Israel to stop attacking them because of their Islamic attitudes, even when they become violent. Even when, a dozen children here in northern Israel, 1,200 Israelis in the south there, that's, no reason to incapacitate your enemy, to psychologically cow your enemy, to go after and attack your enemy and kill them. Oh boy, that's an overreaction, don't you know? Because gosh, that'll just fester the hatreds there, as if the hatreds could get worse, as if that were the cause. I mean, I was told to remember back in 9/11, it was blowback because of America's policy towards Islam. Well, that argument says that there's some kind of moral legitimacy to the claim, to this blowback claim. No, it was the defense of savagery by savages. And they have no right to make that kind of argument. They are wrong. And you're right, it comes down to moral clarity. And there, in his mind, these people feel this way, these people feel that way. Let's come to a negotiated settlement, even if these people want the eradication of Israel and are the worst kind of savages out there who don't recognize rights, versus a country that wants peace and recognizes individual rights to some extent. He can't make that distinction in his head. Again, it's a kind of amorality that leads to the sanction of the victim, which in effect is total immorality, a defense of those evil institutions and people.
And just quickly, we have a super sticker from Bonnie. Thank you so much. And also a super chat from PC who says, James, France will be an Islamic country within 30 years, so by 2054. Well, we stopped them once at the Battle of what was it, Tour? We can do that again. Well, twice, because also Battle of Vienna. But I think, well, it depends what the West will do. If we are at the stage where the Western values are basically, people have given up on Western values, if we are at a place where people no longer care to defend freedom, to defend modernity, basically, then yeah, it might just go a different way. But the answer, because I'm afraid when people start talking about Muslims coming into Europe, because many of them have very crazy ideas, the answer is more Western values. The answer is, as it has been with America for 100 years, it's integration and basically letting them adopt Western values, not giving up, basically resigning, closing our borders and saying, no, we are so afraid of people having different color skin that we cannot allow anyone in, because we don't actually, because those people, they don't, the people who want to close borders, they don't have Western values either. They are afraid of Western values. They are afraid of freedom. So just to defend myself against those people.
Yes, America has absorbed immigrants from every religious group, every nation of the world, people with bizarre political ideas. And if they come to America, they got to live by American rules. And just enforcing that sort of selects properly the correct kind of immigrants. But even if others come in, It's astonishing how in the second and third generations it all breaks down. Can't tell you how many American Muslim families I know that are just horrified and shocked that their children and grandchildren have gone American. But that's what happens, you see. And in many Islamic families in America, just as many Christians would come to America and the grandparents would say, oh my gosh, they're being corrupted by this commercial, American culture that's all hedonism and commercialism from their Christian religious perspective. And they were again disappointed that their kids and grandkids had gone American. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
and it's important to
call it
remember,
assimilation.
try to go back in past and look up the way people spoke about the Irish or the Italians. Yeah, it wasn't really nice stuff. But again, when there is still belief in the Western values, when there is integration, you can still do that. And but
Asians or Africans or any other religious group or ethnic group, whatever the political or religious context they've come from. It's
Yeah,
astonishing.
but
And
we're
yet,
really steered off topic, so let's
yeah,
just
I'm sorry.
so we only have 10 minutes.
Oops, sorry.
I wanted to go back to Alexis' chat. Again, thank you so much. Who says Netanyahu's answer was 100% spot on? So let's actually go to Netanyahu's response. He made about a 2-minute video. I'll just pick up some, I think, good quotes. So he started with, this is a message for President Macron. Israel is fighting on 7 fronts against the enemies of civilization. He listed where everywhere is basically Israel currently fighting. He said shame on them. He also made a point about that the axis of terror stands together. You don't see Iranian embargoes on Hezbollah or the Houthis. He says the axis of terror stands together, but the countries supposedly standing against this axis call for embargo on Israel. He said, what a disgrace. And he ended it with Israel will win with or without them. Israel is defending civilization, fighting for the peace and security of the entire world. So, as Alexis said, I think it is a pretty good response. It really does call out Macron for what it is. He is calling for he is basically calling for the surrender of Israel. If America stopped either exporting or aiding Israel, Israel would be in a big problem. It would actually, it would struggle, and it would most likely be forced into some sort of ceasefire. Which again, something I'd like to point out, because some I don't know if they are, but some people who say we are not objectivists because we are for welfare for Israel. When it comes to what the proper role of government is, it is defending your own citizens. And in I believe that in some cases it might include aid for foreign nations who are fighting against the same people you are. You have to remember, Iran is not only attacking Israel. Iran and its proxies are sinking American ships in the Red Sea. Hamas have kidnapped American citizens on October 7th. Hezbollah, if you go back a bit ago, the barracks attack, or is bombing. Many Americans live in Israel. Many Americans have dual citizenship. So we have a great amount of movement between these two nations. You have many countries in the region actively attacking American citizens. Unless, which I think would be even a better response, unless America wants to directly go into war and destroy the source of this, which is Iran, and actually finally start protecting its own citizens. If it wants to go, let's say, a bit easier route and instead let Israel do the job, I think at the very least, I think it would still sort of fall behind the sort of objectivist view, if I may say so, objectivist view of what's the proper role of the government.
Well, yes, the objectivist role for government is one of national security, certainly. That is the first priority that a nation has, to protect the nation from foreign aggression. And that could involve militarily assisting other nations. Let's take World War II. Before the United States entered World War II, it was actively materially supporting Great Britain. And that was a good thing in my mind. When we actively materially supported Russia, Stalin's Russia, it was truly evil. Now, our libertarian people are really thoughtless in this regard. Yes, of course, it's tax supported. But of all the billions and trillions that are spent of American tax money, the teeny portion, frankly, that is sent to Israel is a drop in the bucket. But even if it were voluntarily financed, our government, I would say that we should be helping Israel, selling them and giving them weapons so that they can defend themselves because they're fighting our battle. They just took out the Hezbollah leader, which killed those hundreds of Marines 40 years ago in Beirut.
Yeah, who had
The
he
American
had he even, America has the bounty program basically. This guy had a bounty on himself.
bounty on his head. Exactly. Oh, and all the other killings of people around the world that Hezbollah has been doing for the last 40 plus years. Now, so America would owe a great debt of gratitude, it would seem to me, if Israel took out Iran's nuclear weapons. And so rather than actually supporting our own interests are being defended by Israel right here and now, just as our own interests were being defended when Great Britain was fighting the Nazis. The question here is not military aid. When military aid is appropriate, that is a proper function of government. The fact that currently it's tax supported is not the justification against it. That would be the last thing I would say when it comes to foreign affairs that we should cut if it's tax supported, even insofar as it's wrongly tax supported. It is a proper function of government to support civilized governments when they're being attacked by aggressive dictatorships. That's part of their role. Now, yes, would I like government to be voluntarily financed? Yes, for everything. But I'm not going to single out Israel like libertarians do and say, okay, this is the time when I really object to foreign aid, is when it's Israel, which a lot of them do. And that is bizarre. It drops context. I mean, my goodness, if it's involuntary taxation that we're talking about, that's one thing. When it comes to defense policy, and it's the Nazis and Iran who are fighting, then America's interests are directly involved. Absolutely. But would that mean that we at the same time sanction and subsidize Soviet Russia back then, or sanction and subsidize Islamic states today? No, but that is what we do. With one hand, we support our interests, and with the other, support our enemies. That's the sanction of that's the sanction of evil right there. Sanction
Right.
of
We don't, America should acknowledge that it's had been in war with Iran for a long time. But just because it is in a conflict with Iran doesn't mean we now have to support Saudi Arabia or Qatar just because, well, they are
right.
also the enemies of Iran. But just quickly jumping back, just so we can actually finish this topic. So after Netanyahu did this, there was a reaction coming out of France. Basically, I think the response was that Netanyahu's reaction to France's arms embargo was excessive, and similar that the calling of disgrace was excessive. So it's almost comical. It's like if I were to say, "Hey, everyone, James just recently had a birthday. Don't go to his party, and actually don't even send him any gifts." And then you're like, "Okay, I don't really like that Daniel said that. It's kind of bad. Like he shouldn't really do that." And then I go, "Whoa, whoa! I just said people shouldn't send you gifts. What are you like? Why are you angry? What did I say?"
It's worse. A party and gifts are positive. What if someone were taking shots at me and you said, Jim should really not shoot back? Because after all, most of the bullets have missed. And since Daniel has been shooting at Jim, and since Jim has been able to block most of the bullets, Jim, in objecting to our demand for a ceasefire, Jim is overreacting. And what does that mean? That means Jim has to sit there and take the bullets being shot at him. Jim has just got to sit there and let someone shoot at him and shoot at him and shoot at him. Macron's position is not okay, look, Israel, if I'm going to criticize Israel, it's because of their underreaction. They're not doing enough to defend themselves. The immoral, if there's an immoral aspect to Netanyahu, it's because he's not done enough, not because he's done too much. And for them to respond by saying that he's overreacting with his moral language, no, That is the only kind of moral language that applies when someone says you have to sit there, suck it up, and get shot at. So, Mr. Macron, when someone shoots at you, I will just say, stop, don't fire back, cease fire, because you're stronger and you've been able to block the blows. You have to endure whatever shots are coming in your direction, Mr. Macron. You have to endure aggressive violence and sit there and take it, and sit there and take it, mind you, and not overreact to it. Now, he would immediately see that that is absurd, immoral, unless he's really a Christian altruist who thinks we should all die, in which case we should all just go out and self-immolate and crucify ourselves, become, martyrs and medieval monks. Is that what he's saying is the or
Well,
is it just a reflection, or is it just a reflection of his racism against Muslims, thinking they can never think any better, or is it a reflection of his anti-Semitism against Jewish people, which is long festered in his country? Now, those kind of collectivist and mystical justifications seem to me better explanations for his grotesquely immoral position on Israel. So it is shameful. Shame on Macron. Agree with Netanyahu to that extent. If there's any moral criticism, sir, of Israel, it's because they haven't done enough. And they're calling your evil statement evil is just the correct form of language to be used. You're saying they have to suck it up when they're being shot at. No, sir. You're being immoral and saying they have to die.
well, I grew up on an art that sort of preached good guys, in a sense, converting the bad guys, and the bad guys sort of like trying to go on a journey to redeem themselves. So a lot of when I was a child, a lot of stuff was like that. So if Macron was getting shooted at, I'd say, now you have to defend yourself, and you see why it's important. You see why you can't why you can't hold back when your life is threatened, why you can't hold back when the main purpose of the enemy is or the main purpose of your adversary is actually your destruction. It is not just some sort of establishing peace. No, they want to destroy you.
Well, whether in the form you make or the form I make, we're asking him for logical consistency, aren't we? And that's the big problem with our approach. Mr. Macron, I think you'd have a different position if you were the one being shot at. And you should think about that for a second, because this is a principle here we're talking about of self-defense. But it's almost as though the assumption is though the Islamic world at some point will just absorb look. Gandhi used passive resistance, and it got to the British population and achieved Indian independence, but only because the British population was civilized and they could respond to that. This turn the other cheek, pacifist, nonviolent resistance stuff that Martin Luther King and Gandhi were famous for only worked because they were addressing the American and British populations. And a different population, today the Muslim population, conditioned by their philosophy, that will never happen. You can turn the other cheek, Mr. Macron, until you are dead, until they have mutilated you, dismembered you, raped you, and they will not change their attitude. Turning the other cheek wouldn't have worked with Hitler, it wouldn't have worked with Stalin, and it's certainly not going to work with Islamicists. At some point, they won't just innately or intrinsically get the idea that, oh my goodness, violence is awful and we should really, and their turning the other cheek is so noble that we've been converted by their saintliness. No, just never going to happen. In fact, what you're doing is you're saying that there's some moral goodness on the side of the Muslims. You're sanctioning them morally, saying that they've got a point. What Macron is doing, the worst thing he's doing, is morally sanctioning the evil of Islamicism in calling for a ceasefire, effectively.
So we're super late for the reality show, but we have the reality show coming right after. It's again, we decided to make it open to everyone. So usually on Sunday we have the reality show extra just for members. But I think today, especially depending if Israel actually does respond to Iran, I think it's worth it to make it available for everyone. So this is our gift to you. Link is in the chat. For that, we will be talking about UNRWA now banned. Legislation passed through Knesset banning the activities of UNRWA, basically prohibiting prohibiting giving for example, like visas to UNRWA workers, prohibiting Israeli officials to interact with UNRWA workers, and also stripping a lot of the basically immunity from the UNRWA workers, so they can be prosecuted because many of them joined on October 7th. So we will be talking about that, and since we have about a year to go back, we'll also be covering what's a problem with UNRWA. So we'll have a lot
My
of
one last comment is when we know that UNRWA is teaching Hamas hatred, when you know that there are Hamas workers working with UNRWA, you are, if you restore funding to UNRWA in your Western country, like Macron, that is overtly and materially supporting the destruction of Israel. No way, and it's not merely moral sanction, it's material support for the evil. That's how far it goes. That's why we have to connect the dots in this way. Macron is pro-Islamic violence and calling for perpetual war, not an end to war, with his ceasefire nonsense. My last thought for the day. Be safe.
So just putting the link there again. Join us in just about a minute or so where we'll go live. Thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and see you on the Reality Show Extra in just about a minute or so.